You know, as we come together in this moment, we are not here to add anything to ourselves, nor are we here to gather techniques to manipulate the outer world. We are here for one reason alone: to return to the awareness of the presence that has never left us. All the fear, all the panic, all the anxiety you have known in your human experience, these have arisen only because attention drifted outward to appearances and away from the kingdom within. And so the problems of the so-called world seem to take on a power they do not possess. If you understand this first principle, you understand the foundation of all spiritual living. Nothing external has power. Power is not in circumstances, not in bills, not in conditions, not in the body, not in the mind. All power is spiritual. All power is in God. But to know this as more than words, there must be a turning, an inner recognition of the presence that is closer than breathing, and yet unnoticed when we rush to solve, to fix, to fear in this hour. We are not here to struggle with effects. We are here to awaken to cause. And cause is always, eternally, your consciousness of God, not a God afar off, not a God who must be persuaded to act, but the living presence at the center of your being. Every discord, every fear, every sense of lack has its root in the belief that you stand apart from that presence. Every harmony, every healing, every supply that has ever appeared in your life has come through some measure of awareness of your oneness with it. I would like you to understand from the outset that we are not preparing to overcome fear. We are preparing to see through it. We are not here to manipulate the outer scene. We are here to behold the reality behind the scene. And when this inner shift occurs, even for a moment, you will find that outer experience must conform to the inner recognition. That is why Jesus taught, seek first the kingdom, not as a command, but as a spiritual law. The kingdom is not something to be achieved. It is something to be recognized. Throughout our time together, we shall look at the nature of panic, the reason it arises, and how, through a simple turning within, it dissolves in the light of truth. We shall discover why every spiritual master speaks of a pause, a stillness, a resting, and why in that stillness the fears of the world lose their seeming reality. And most importantly, we shall learn together how to bring this recognition not only into meditation, but into the very moments when the world shouts its loudest, when a bill appears, when bad news arrives, when anxiety grips the chest. It is precisely there that you will discover the kingdom is not hidden. It is present. It is accessible. And so let us begin not by searching outwardly, but by acknowledging that the presence is here, right where you are, right now. And in that quiet acknowledgement, you are already seeking first. Now, let us look with honesty and with gentleness at this matter of panic, because it touches every human life in one form or another. And yet, if we understand its nature spiritually, we discover something quite surprising. Panic has no truth in it. Panic is not an experience ordained by God. It is the natural consequence of believing that power rests in the outer world. It appears the moment we forget the source and begin to react to appearances as though they were cause. Every fear, every anxious tightening begins with a single assumption: I am separate from my supply. I am separate from my health. I am separate from safety, harmony, and peace. The moment this belief takes hold, we begin seeking in the world of effect, seeking solutions, seeking protection, seeking reassurance. But this seeking is not seeking first. It is seeking second. And seeking second is the spiritual root of panic. When the bill arrives unexpectedly, you will notice how swiftly the mind declares, "I do not have enough." That is seeking second. When the doctor speaks of symptoms, the mind races to outcomes. That is seeking second. When relationships fracture, the mind searches for explanations, defenses, strategies. Again, seeking second. All of this movement is the mind turning outward, assigning power and intelligence to the world of form, forgetting that form is never cause, it is only effect. As long as we believe that something external has the authority to harm us or to limit us, fear will inevitably arise. And yet, there is a deeper truth. Panic never arises because of the appearance itself. Panic arises because the mind has stepped outside its own center. It has lost sight of the presence. It has begun to live in the realm of shadows rather than in the light of reality. A bill cannot create fear. Ink and paper have no law. The body cannot create fear. It is a form through which life expresses. Words spoken by another cannot create fear. They are vibrations of air, nothing more. Fear arises only because consciousness assigns power to that which has none. This is why every spiritual teaching begins with humility, not as a moral quality, but as a recognition that the human mind, left to itself, sees falsely. The human mind sees through the lens of separation. It sees a world of many powers, many causes, many dangers, and from that false vision, it draws false conclusions. When you begin to understand this, you will see that panic is not your enemy. It is simply the mind announcing, "I have lost awareness of truth," and at that moment, you do not battle panic, nor do you try to affirm it away. You do not run to human solutions, nor do you condemn yourself for feeling afraid. Instead, you quietly acknowledge what has taken place. The mind has begun to seek second. That acknowledgement alone is the first step in awakening. For in recognizing the source of panic, you begin to withdraw belief from appearances, you begin to reclaim your center, and in that silent turning, you are already shifting from fear to recognition, from the outer world to the kingdom within. The presence of panic is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that the opportunity for remembrance is present. It is the doorway back to seeking first. Every fear is a call to come home. Every anxious moment is an invitation to rediscover the presence that never leaves you, though you may lose sight of it in the noise of the world. And so, let us not fear panic. Let us understand it. Let us allow it to reveal where we have been seeking. And then, let us gently turn again to the true source, remembering that fear arises only when consciousness momentarily forgets its own oneness with God. When Jesus spoke the words, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you," he was not offering a commandment, nor was he presenting a technique for obtaining better human conditions. He was stating a spiritual law, a law as absolute and as unchanging as the law of gravity, and it is only in understanding this law spiritually that it becomes practical in daily life. The kingdom of God is not a place. It is not a future state. It is not an achievement for the virtuous or the disciplined. The kingdom of God is the conscious awareness of God's presence here, now, within your own being. It is the inner realization that the life you live is not self-sustained. It is God-sustained. It is the recognition that you do not stand apart from your source, but that your very being is the expression of that source. To seek first the kingdom is simply to remember this truth before turning to the world of appearances. It does not mean spending hours in meditation, nor does it mean withdrawing from human responsibilities. It means that before you look to effects, you acknowledge cause. Before you look to the body, you acknowledge life. Before you look to finances, you acknowledge supply. Before you look to human relationships, you acknowledge love. But notice something very important. Jesus did not say, seek the kingdom so that all these things may be added. He said, seek first the kingdom, and then all these things are added. He was revealing that the outer forms of life are not the result of effort, struggle, or human planning. They are the natural expression of consciousness when it is aligned with truth. When you seek the kingdom first, you are aligning with reality. You are resting in the awareness that all you ever desire, peace, supply, health, harmony, is already established in God, and therefore already present in the infinite spiritual reality that is your true life. When you forget this, you begin seeking second. You look to the outer world for peace, for assurance, for answers. And the outer world, having no power of its own, cannot supply what only inner recognition can reveal. This is why Jesus taught, take no thought for your life. He was not advising irresponsibility. He was teaching a shift of consciousness. He was pointing to a state of awareness in which the mind no longer attempts to secure itself through external means, but rests in the presence that is the very substance of life. The human mind always seeks second. It looks outward first, tries to solve, tries to prevent, tries to control. Spiritual consciousness seeks first. It turns inward before taking a step outward. It rests in God before addressing appearance. It abides in the presence before forming a plan. This is not a mystical ideal. It is the most practical way to live, because harmony can only be experienced when consciousness is aligned with its source. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was revealing that you do not have to go anywhere to find God. You do not have to request what already is. You do not have to persuade what has already given itself as your being. You have only to recognize. Recognition is the true seeking, seeking that begins and ends within. And so, when we speak of seeking first the kingdom, we are speaking of a shift from fear to recognition, from outer dependence to inner awareness, from the world of effect to the realm of cause. This shift is not dramatic. It is not emotional. It is quiet, gentle, and certain. It is the simple turning of consciousness toward its own source. As this becomes clear, you will discover that the words of Jesus were not distant spiritual poetry, but practical instruction for daily living. He was showing humanity how to meet every appearance, from the smallest irritation to the greatest crisis, not with fear, but with the calm assurance that God is the only presence and the only power. And when this assurance dawns, even faintly, the outer world begins to take care of itself, not because you have forced it, but because you have aligned with the kingdom that has always been the foundation of your life. Once we understand that all panic arises from seeking second, we can begin to see why the very first step in any spiritual response, whether the circumstance is small or great, is the pause. This pause is not a technique. It is not a breathing exercise. It is not a moment of forced calm. It is the conscious refusal to grant power to appearances. and the conscious return to the awareness of the presence within. You see, when an alarming situation arises, the human mind immediately leaps outward. It races to conclusions, to judgments, to imagined outcomes. It begins forming strategies, defenses, and explanations. This is the automatic habit of a mind that believes in a world of many powers. And in that instant, separation is felt, fear is born, but the pause interrupts this automatic movement. The pause says, no, I will not react. I will not allow the appearance to dictate the state of my consciousness. I will turn within. And in that turning, the power that you unconsciously assign to the appearance is withdrawn. The appearance is disarmed not by force, but by the simple recognition that it has no power of its own. A bill arrives. The old habit would be, what shall I do? How will I pay? What will happen? But in the pause, you do not follow that impulse. You turn within. Father, here I am. Let the truth reveal itself. A physical symptom appears. The old habit would be, what if? What next? What does this mean? But in the pause, you step out of the mental storm. Life is God. God is here. God is the only law operating. This pause is not procrastination. It is alignment. It restores the awareness that God alone is cause. It reestablishes the truth that your being is not vulnerable, not dependent on matter, not separated from infinite supply, life, or peace. And the moment this recognition begins, even faintly the grip of panic loosens. The pause is the doorway through which spiritual clarity enters. It is the space in which we disengage from the reaction of the senses and turn toward the reality that stands behind all appearance. Without this pause, we remain entangled in the world of effect. With it, we step into the atmosphere of the kingdom. Goldsmith often said that spiritual living is a life of remembering. You remember the presence. You remember the truth. You remember who you are in God and who God is in you. But remembrance is impossible if the mind is racing. Therefore, the pause becomes the first act of grace. The moment we pause, we silence the mind sufficiently for truth to reveal itself. You may notice at first that the pause feels unnatural. The old conditioning urges you to respond immediately, to fix, to protect, to analyze. But in time, the pause becomes natural. It becomes instinctive. It becomes the moment in which you step out of the human sense of self into the spiritual center of your being. Understand this clearly. The pause does not solve the problem. The pause allows you to see that God is the only power, and that recognition dissolves the problem at its root. As you practice this pause, you will begin to notice something profound. The very moment you stop reacting, the disturbance in the mind fades. The moment you withdraw your belief from appearances, their seeming authority weakens. And in that space, spiritual intuition begins to function. Answers arise, peace returns, guidance reveals itself, not because you forced it, not because you thought your way through it, but because in the pause, you opened the way for the kingdom to reveal what has always been true. Thus, the pause is the first movement of seeking first. It is the act of turning from the world of effect toward the source itself. It is the way we step out of fear and back into the atmosphere of truth. And as we continue, you will see how this pause naturally leads into the deeper practice of recognition of what is spiritually real and what is not. Once we understand the pause, we are ready for the essence of the spiritual life. And it is here, perhaps more than anywhere else, that Joel Goldsmith diverged from traditional religion and metaphysical systems. He discovered that the moment we attempt to treat a problem, whether through prayer, affirmation, visualization, or mental effort, we have already granted reality to the problem. We have said, in effect, this appearance has power, substance, and law. And now I must counteract it. But spiritual healing does not take place by opposing error. It takes place by seeing through it. And it is in this seeing that recognition becomes the great unveiling. Recognition is the realization of what already is, not the attempt to make something happen. Let us look together at the difference. When you treat a problem, you begin from the premise that there is something needing correction, something lacking, something broken. And from that premise, the mind tries to impose a spiritual truth upon a situation it believes is real. This effort may bring temporary relief, but it cannot bring lasting harmony because it begins from duality, from the belief in both God and something unlike God. Recognition, however, begins from an entirely different foundation. Recognition declares, God is the only presence. God is the only power. Therefore, anything appearing as fear, lack, disease, or discord has no spiritual law to support it. It has no truth. It has no permanence. It has no cause. In recognition, we do not fight the appearance. We do not argue with it. We do not affirm its opposite. We simply acknowledge the presence of God as the only reality. You see, the moment we begin to treat a condition, we accept the condition as part of our consciousness. But the moment we recognize that God alone constitutes our consciousness, the condition dissolves of its own nothingness. Recognition is the turning of the inner eye from the world of shadows to the light that reveals there were never two powers, never two realities. Let us take an example. Suppose the appearance of lack confronts you. The human mind immediately reasons, I must affirm abundance. I must believe for increase. I must declare supply. But all such activity is treatment. It accepts lack as something to be remedied. The more we try to affirm abundance, the more we subtly declare that lack is present. Recognition takes another path entirely. It says quietly, infinite supply is the nature of God, and God is the substance of my being. Therefore, lack has no reality in my consciousness. It is not a condition to fix. It is an illusion to see through. You do not fight lack. You recognize abundance as a spiritual fact. You do not fight sickness. You recognize wholeness as the nature of life itself. You do not fight discord. You recognize harmony as the essence of divine presence. When you recognize, you stop trying to create spiritual good and realize that spiritual good is already established. You rest not to produce a result, but to acknowledge reality. And in that resting, the fear dissolves, the mind becomes still, and spiritual law reveals itself as outer harmony. The secret lies here. Recognition never begins with the problem. Recognition begins with God. When you treat, you begin with the appearance. When you recognize, you begin with the presence. One binds you to the world of illusion, the other frees you into the realm of the kingdom. This is why Goldsmith called recognition the highest form of prayer, for in recognition, we do not attempt to bring God into a situation. We realize that God is already the substance, the life, the law, and the activity of our being. The situation is seen not as something needing divine intervention, but as an opportunity for divine reality to be realized. And so, as we move forward, I want you to remember this simple truth. Spiritual harmony does not come because you force it. It comes because you see clearly. Recognition is spiritual seeing. It is the awareness that there is only one presence and one power. And when this awareness dawns, the shadows of fear and panic lose their foundation. In recognition, you are no longer trying to fix life. You are beholding life as God expressing itself. And that realization is the beginning of freedom. As we move deeper into this work, we begin to see why the spiritual life cannot be lived by human effort. Human effort belongs to the realm of cause and effect. The belief that outcomes depend upon personal strength, personal wisdom, personal planning. But in the spiritual life, we discover that all genuine harmony flows not from effort, but from grace. Grace is the activity of God within your consciousness, unfolding without strain, without pressure, without forcing. And here again we find a truth that is simple, but not always easy to accept. Every place in your life where you struggle, you are living by human effort. Every place where there is peace, you are living by grace. Grace does not mean passivity. It does not mean we sit idle, waiting for life to arrange itself. Rather, it means that we do not attempt to arrange life through fear-driven action. We act, but our action flows from inner guidance, not from panic. We move, but the movement arises from stillness, not urgency. Grace becomes the invisible order behind every visible step you take. Human effort says, I must make this happen. I must find the solution. I must protect myself. I must secure my future, Grace whispers. God is the activity of your being. God is the intelligence that goes before you. God is the supply, the health, the harmony, the order. Rest and let the infinite reveal itself. In the life of the human, every need becomes a burden. But in the life lived by grace, every need becomes an opportunity for the presence to reveal another facet of its harmony. You do not fear needs. You welcome them as occasions for recognition. You do not dread change. You understand that grace always expresses as exactly what is needed, in exactly the way it is needed, at exactly the right time. You will notice that when you are living by human effort, your actions are anxious, hurried, or pressured. They come from a sense of incompleteness. They come from the belief that something is missing in you or in your world. But grace moves differently. Grace moves quietly. Grace never strains. Grace never rushes. Grace operates from fullness, not lack. Goldsmith often reminded his students, God performs, God reveals, God sustains. When you understand this, you no longer try to direct the infinite. You no longer attempt to persuade God to do what the infinite is already doing. You no longer attempt to improve the perfect or to repair the eternal. Instead, you surrender the belief that your human will holds the key to harmony. And in that surrender, you find rest. Rest is the atmosphere of grace. Rest is the recognition that nothing essential can be taken from you and nothing real can be withheld from you. Rest is the knowing that your life is lived by God, not by the limited sense of self. Let us look again at the practical side of this. When a financial need arises, the human mind immediately begins calculating, planning, worrying, but living by grace means you first turn within and acknowledge supply is spiritual. It is infinite. It is God expressing as my experience. In that recognition, ideas come, guidance appears, opportunities unfold, and even if none of these appear immediately, the fear dissolves, and when fear dissolves, the way is clear for grace to act. When a physical appearance arises, the human mind begins its search for causes and remedies. But grace reveals that life is God and God is indivisible. You do not have to force healing. You rest in the recognition that wholeness is the nature of your being. And from that rest, harmony manifests not as a result of struggle, but as the natural activity of divine presence. When discord appears in relationships, the human mind seeks control, justification, or defense. But grace reveals that love is the only reality, and love is always present. When you rest in that truth, the discord loses its force. You find yourself speaking words you could not have planned, taking actions you could not have invented. Grace expresses itself as harmony, reconciliation, or calm separation, whatever is aligned with divine order. The key is this: grace cannot flow where effort is in control. Grace reveals itself the moment you release the belief that you must manage life. Living by grace is living from the kingdom within. It is the realization that God, not the human mind, is the source, the guide, the healer, the supply. And when this awareness becomes your foundation, you find that life begins to unfold with an ease you could never have created. You take the steps that are yours to take, but you take them from inner fullness. You act, but action is no longer a product of fear. You move, but movement is guided. You speak, but the words come through you, not from you. This is the life Jesus described when he said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." He was not speaking poetically. He was describing life lived by grace, life lived by the presence rather than the personal self. In this recognition, strain disappears. In this recognition, fear dissolves. In this recognition, you discover that the kingdom was never a distant goal, but the ground of your being in every moment. Now that we understand the pause and the deeper practice of recognition and the meaning of living by grace, let us bring this teaching into the very moments where life seems most demanding. For it is easy to speak of spiritual truth in the quiet of meditation, but the true measure of inner awareness is discovered in the midst of daily experience, when appearances arise suddenly, when the mind is tempted to react, and when the senses insist upon the reality of fear. And so, let us look together at what it means to seek first the kingdom, in the exact moments when the world would persuade you to seek second. Remember this: seeking first is not an action of the mind, it is a shift in consciousness. It is the turning from appearance to reality, from fear to presence, from the outer scene to the inner source. Let us walk through several common situations, for each one presents the same spiritual invitation, though the form may differ. A. When a frightening bill appears, you open the envelope or you see the notification on your screen, and immediately the old conditioning rises. The mind begins to calculate, to fear, to imagine. In that instant, the sense of separation returns. I must find a way. I must fix this. But this is the moment when spiritual practice becomes real. Before you react, pause, not to suppress fear, not to deny the need, but to acknowledge the truth. God is the source and substance of all supply. I am not separate from God. In that moment of recognition, the fear begins to dissolve, the sense of helplessness lifts. You discover that the need does not define you, nor does it limit you. Now, from this centered awareness, you may take whatever practical steps are given, but those steps will arise from peace, not panic. The outer need has not disappeared, but something far more important has occurred. The need no longer dictates the state of your consciousness, and when consciousness is no longer enslaved to appearance, grace can begin its work. B. When an unexpected symptom or diagnosis appears, perhaps you feel something in the body, or a doctor speaks words that seem heavy with fear, the human mind would immediately identify with the body and conclude, "This is happening to me." But you are not the body. The body is an instrument of experience, not the source of your life. Life is God. Life is infinite. Life is indivisible. So when the appearance of illness arises, do not rush to treat it mentally. Do not attempt to force a healing. Instead, pause. In that pause, turn inward. Father, you are the life of my being. Whatever you are, I am. In that recognition, you withdraw the power that fear had begun to assign to the appearance. You realize that the body does not govern your life. The presence governs the body. From this recognition, harmony can reveal itself in ways beyond human planning, through medicine, through rest, through intuition, through unexpected avenues. But the healing does not come from the avenue, it comes from the recognition. C. When anxiety floods you without reason, there are times when fear arises seemingly out of nowhere, a tightening in the chest, a cloud over the mind. The human impulse is to resist it, to question it, to attempt to push it away, but resistance only strengthens it. Instead, pause. Let the fear be what it is, a passing appearance in consciousness, not your identity. And in that stillness, recognize there is only one power. Fear has no presence, no law, no substance. Do not fight the fear. Do not analyze it. Simply refuse to grant it authority. In that gentle refusal, the fear loses its foundation. It dissolves like mist before the sun, not because you battled it, but because you stood in the recognition of truth. D. When relationships erupt in conflict, here, perhaps more than anywhere else, the temptation to seek second becomes strong. Words are spoken, emotions flare, misunderstandings arise. The mind wishes to defend, to explain, to protect itself. But in that very moment, if you can remain awake, you will see that conflict is nothing more than the appearance of two personalities forgetting the one. Presence. Before speaking, pause. Recognize. There is only one life here. Only one presence. Only one love. Whether the other person recognizes this or not is irrelevant. Your recognition creates the atmosphere in which harmony can reappear. You may find that your words soften, or that a wise silence arises, or that understanding emerges where tension once lived. Divine love makes the adjustment, not human will. E. When the future feels uncertain, the human mind always wants security in form, in savings, in plans, in predictions. But spiritual security does not come from the seen, it comes from the unseen. When the future feels unclear, turn within and acknowledge. Divine intelligence goes before me. It prepares the way. The path is already established. This recognition frees you from anxiety about outcomes. You do not need to know the future to be safe. You need only rest in the presence that governs the future. These examples all point to the same truth. Seeking first is the practice of turning inward before turning outward. It is the recognition of God as the only presence and the only power. When consciousness remains aligned with this truth, outer circumstances lose their power to disturb. The world no longer governs your state of being. Instead, your state of being becomes the atmosphere in which the world unfolds harmoniously. This is not idealism. It is spiritual law. It is the way of the kingdom. As we move toward the deeper stages of this work, it becomes important to understand that spiritual practice is not meant to be confined to brief moments of meditation or emergency situations. Those moments are essential, yes, but they are only the doorway. The true transformation occurs when seeking the kingdom becomes the foundation of your daily life, when recognition becomes as natural to you as breathing, when the presence becomes the underlying atmosphere of every thought, every decision, every interaction. This does not happen through discipline or through striving. It happens through remembering, through gentle, steady, continuous remembrance. And so we must learn how to bring this inner awareness into the entire pattern of daily living, not as a task, not as a duty, but as a quiet orientation of consciousness. Let us consider how this unfolds. 1. Morning, establishing the tone of the day. In the first moments upon waking, before thought has fully taken form, there is a sacred opportunity. The mind has not yet begun its habitual activity. The senses have not yet begun to pull you outward. In that moment, simply rest in the awareness. The presence is here. The kingdom is within me. I and the Father are one. This recognition sets the tone for the entire day. It does not need to be long. Even a few seconds of quiet acknowledgement shifts consciousness from separation to union. You are not preparing the presence to accompany you into the day. You are recognizing that the presence has been the life of your night as well as your waking. Once this recognition is established, even faintly the day unfolds from a different foundation. You move not from human intention but from spiritual alignment. 2. Throughout the day, returning again and again to presence, seeking first becomes natural as you learn to return to the inner quiet, repeatedly, gently, without effort. Not long periods, not dramatic meditations, just brief turnings inward. When you pause in the middle of activity and quietly acknowledge, God is here. Effort. You are reestablishing the atmosphere of truth in which the rest of your actions will unfold. These moments do not interrupt your life. They anchor your life. They weave recognition into the very fabric of your day while you are working, speaking, driving, washing dishes, answering messages. Little by little, the sense of separation weakens and the awareness of oneness strengthens. 3. Evening, releasing the day back to the presence. At the close of the day, as you prepare to sleep, there is another opportunity. Before the mind recounts the events of the day, before it judges or analyzes, you may quietly rest in the awareness. Nothing today occurred outside the presence. Nothing today touched the reality of my being. All is well in God. This is not denial. It is recognition. You are not erasing the day. You are seeing through it to the presence that carried you through every moment in this recognition. The subconscious is freed from the burden of fear. Rest becomes peaceful, restorative, natural. 4. How you know the practice is working as seeking first becomes your foundation. Changes will appear not necessarily dramatic at first, but subtle, unmistakable, steady. You may notice panic arises less often, fear loses its authority, decisions become clear, you speak with greater calm, you respond rather than react, harmony appears without strain, problems resolve without intense mental effort. You may discover that people respond differently to you, more gently, more openly, not because you have changed them, but because the atmosphere of your consciousness no longer invites conflict. You may observe that needs are met in surprising or effortless ways, not because you are manifesting, but because grace is now unobstructed. This is not magic. It is spiritual law functioning through a consciousness that has ceased to resist it. 5. The shift from practice to awareness. At first, you will practice turning within. In time, you will simply live from within. At first, you will remember the presence. In time, you will abide in the presence. At first, you will pause when fear arises. In time, fear will rarely arise. At first, you will consciously seek the kingdom. In time, you will discover that the kingdom was seeking you all along. This is the natural progression of the spiritual life. Practice gives way to embodiment. Effort gives way to ease. Seeking gives way to knowing. 6. What integration truly means. Integration does not mean that you retire from the world. It does not mean that you withdraw from responsibilities or refuse to act. Integration means that you live your outer life from an inner center. It means that you no longer depend on circumstances for peace, nor on people for love, nor on the body for life, nor on the world for security. Integration means that the presence becomes your resting place, your identity, your foundation, and from that foundation, you move into the world not as a fearful human battling for survival, but as a spiritual being through whom the grace of God expresses. This is the meaning of seeking first. It is the meaning of awakening. It is the meaning of the kingdom. As we come to the close of this teaching, let us rest together for a moment in the quiet awareness that all we have spoken of is not something to be attained in the future. It is not a spiritual condition you must earn. It is not a higher state you must climb into. The kingdom of God is not an achievement. It is the present reality of your being. Everything you seek is already within you. Everything you fear losing cannot touch the life that animates you. Everything that appears as need, conflict, or limitation is but a shadow compared to the light of the presence that dwells at the center of your consciousness. Let us recognize this now, not with effort, not with strain, but with a simple willingness to be still. Be still and know what? Know that I, this divine presence, this infinite life, this silent reality is God, not a God out in the heavens, not a God afar off, not a God responding to your pleas, but God is the living essence of your being. God is the consciousness you are aware of in this moment. God is the life that breathes you, moves you, sustains you. Right now, let your thought rest upon this truth. There is only one presence. There is only one power. There is only one life. And that life is expressing itself as you. All fear dissolves in this recognition, because fear requires belief in something other than God. All lack dissolves in this recognition, because supply is the nature of God consciousness. All discord dissolves in this recognition because love is the structure of reality. As you rest in this awareness, notice that nothing is being done. You are not trying to become spiritual. You are not trying to think correctly. You are not trying to solve anything. You are simply recognizing what is already true. This recognition, quiet, gentle, effortless, is the beginning and the end of the spiritual path. It is the meaning of seek first the kingdom. Not that you must go find it, but that you turn away from the false belief in an external power and return again and again to the presence that has never left you. You need not perfect this practice. You need only remember it. And if you forget it 1,000 times, return 1,000 times. Each return strengthens the awareness of oneness. Each return weakens the illusion of separation. Each return opens the way for grace. Let us rest a moment longer in the simple acknowledgement, the kingdom of God is within me. I and the Father are one. All that God is expressing itself as my life, my being, my consciousness. Feel the stillness that follows such recognition. It is not the stillness of silence. It is the stillness of truth, a stillness that has always been here, waiting for you to notice it. This is the foundation of your new life, not a life free from appearances, but a life free from bondage to appearances. Not a life without challenges, but a life in which challenges no longer dictate your state of being. Not a life of human striving, but a life of divine unfolding. As you leave this teaching, you do not carry new ideas. You carry a new awareness, an awareness that your safety, your supply, your peace, your joy, your wholeness are all anchored in the presence that lives you. Walk gently, act when guided, rest often, and return always. For the kingdom is not far, the kingdom is not hidden, the kingdom is not conditional. The kingdom is the very essence of your being now, here, forever. And as you recognize this, even faintly, even imperfectly, the grace of God begins to reveal itself as your life. All is well. All has always been well. And all will continue to unfold from the fullness of the presence within.